Hello friends! Welcome back to the channel. My name's Maile if you're new here, and I'm already in a weird mood, so strap in. Today, I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I've read so far this year. I think I've read like 21 or 22 books. I don't know, we'll talk about them. But I've got some really, really good ones and some not so good ones. So it's gonna be a wide variety of books. And if you're new to this channel, we do lots of fun things. Mostly vlog, lifestyle type content, grocery videos, shopping videos, book content, theater content, all kinds of things. So forget subscribe. If you're not subscribed already, what are you waiting for? Without further ado, let's get into these books because it's a lot. Okay, for the first time, I have the most handy dandy tool, my book journal. I have started a book journal this year, and let me just show you. Oh my gosh, where is the opening? This is the page where I track all the books I've read by genre. So the ones that are filled in are the ones that I've read, and their color corresponds to the genre that they are. 22 books so far to discuss with you today. And let's just jump right in. So the first book I read this year is a book called Troublemaker. It is Leah Remini's memoir about being in the Church of Scientology. And it's actually about 5 or 6 years old, which I was kind of bummed about because I've seen her documentary, I know her story, I've read a lot. So I read it from an informed place. So it seemed a little outdated. I wish I had read it when it came out 5 years ago. It would have been more exciting and more like mind-blowing, I guess. But my favorite kind of memoirs to read are the ones about like extreme religion and cult-like behavior. And it's just endlessly fascinating to me how a person can get sucked into an environment like that and how crazy hardcore they are and how they just take advantage of people and are evil. And man, if you don't know much about her story, but you're interested in something like that, you have to read this book because it is so stinking good. And honestly, listen to the audiobook version because she narrates it and it is so stinking good. What I liked best about this book was that she was totally truthful, even when a story didn't make her look very good. She talked about the affair she had with her now husband. She talked about all kinds of bad decisions that she made in her life. And to me, it just felt very relatable. And like she was saying, here's all my dirty laundry. Here's all the secrets I have. I'm not hiding anything. That's why you should believe me when I talk about how bad the Church of Scientology is, because they are hiding all these horrible things and nobody's talking about it. And somebody has to. So very, very fascinating. I gave it 4 stars and I definitely recommend. Next, oh my gosh. Next I read this fantasy book called Throne in the Dark. And Carrie Can Read, who's one of my favorite booktubers, said that it was just like a laugh and a half. She absolutely loved it. It's basically about Prince Scott. Is he a prince? Yeah, I think he's a prince, who's like a total villain, comes from like a really bad family and is evil. And he is thrown together under weird circumstances with this girl who's like a total angel type vibe. And they come together, they grow to form a bond. And it turns out he's like the worst villain possible because he's actually a really good person. And he has to like fight against his instincts to be a villain. He's learned all his life from his family. So it's a very interesting sounding, fun, kind of different vibe to a fantasy. But let me just tell you, I hated it. It was so long, it drudged out. It was the kind of story that I don't think it was badly written. I think it was well written and I liked the concept. I just didn't like the actuality of what it was. It was 90%, 95%, I would say, a journey type story. And that's just one of my least favorite things to read when you feel like Lord of the Rings style, endless journey. Your main characters are out on the road and they're going and going and going for days and days and weeks and months and go for a little bit of a stretch and then they come across an obstacle that they have to fight. And then they go for another stretch and they come across another obstacle. It's just, I don't like that format. It's super boring to me, super long. It makes me antsy and I'm just like, get to the point of the story already, just get there. So it wasn't my cup of tea, which is why I rated it 2 stars and I really didn't like it. I barely finished it. But that's not to say it was a bad book. I think if you like the concept of that and like a nice like journey, see what happens along the way kind of vibe in a fantasy book, a very lighthearted, very fun, kind of quirky and funny characters, then you probably would like this. It just wasn't my thing. Okie dokie. And then I began the saga of the year, okay? Honestly, I could not tell you what sparked this actually. I really don't even remember, but I decided that I was going to reread the Princess Diaries book series. So I don't know if you know or not, the Disney movie, The Princess Diaries, which is one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time, okay? It's actually based on a book series by Meg Cabot, who is one of the most well-known young adult authors, okay? She's a classic. I love her. When I was about 14, 15, 16 maybe, I read all the books that were out at the time, I think. I didn't read all the series, but I read probably 6 or 7 or 8. and I absolutely adored them. They were like my favorite books as a young teen, and I just thought about them one day recently and thought, I wonder if those hold up. I wonder if it's as good as I remember it being. And so I thought, might as well just reread them. I don't really remember much about them. It would be so fun to revisit a childhood, teenage book and kind of reminisce. And let me just tell you, it did not disappoint. Especially the first book, The Princess Diaries, is probably the best young adult book I've ever read in my entire life. It is so incredibly good. Such a relatable character. Mia is just realistic. She's a real ass teenager, and she is quirky and awkward and insecure and just word vomits her thoughts onto the page in the most endearing, relatable way. It's funny as heck. Oh my gosh, like the shenanigans she gets into, her friends, Lily Motzkovitz, her best friend, I love her so much. It is incredible, 5-star, one of my favorite books of all time, okay? It's that good. And so I'll skip a lot, like 12 of these numbers of books. I read the entire series in like a month because, and I think that's like 12 or 13 books. They're just that good. Some of them are better than others, but none of them I rated less than a 3-star. Most of them I rated 4, and I think maybe 3 total I rated 5 stars, including this first book. Absolutely recommend. It's a fun, quirky, hilarious read. I think anyone would like it, honestly. So you should definitely check out the full Princess Diaries series. Next, I read another book that I was inspired to reread from my early teen years. It's called Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging, which sounds a little risque, but it's actually not. It's a very similar, like diary-esque young teenage girl book, and she talks about all her escapades and her worries and her relationships and everything that happens to her in her life, and she's so angsty and freaking hilarious. It's a really, really, really good book, but it did not hold up as well as the Princess Diaries series did for me. It was great. I had a fantastic time reminiscing. I don't think I can recommend it though because it felt super outdated. It's also British, and so the humor is, I loved it reading as an adult. I think I got it a lot more as an adult reading it even than I did as a kid. But I don't know, something about it just felt a little bit more flat for me, especially compared to just having read the high of the Princess Diaries series. It just didn't hold up to that. But that's not to say it's not good. It's just fairly dated, and there's a couple of problematic elements to it nowadays that I wouldn't recommend kids to read it, but I gave it 3 stars. I still thoroughly enjoyed rereading it. Excuse me while I just flip past all the Princess Diaries pages. Oh my gosh. One of the best books that I have read all year is My Name is Barbara Streisand's long-awaited autobiography. It's almost 1,000 pages. It was a feat to complete, and I'm so proud of myself that I did. It was one of the most illuminating stories I've just ever read about a person. An incredibly, endlessly fascinating memoir. Definitely listen to the audiobook if you can, because she talks about music and shows she does and songs she writes and performances she makes throughout the entire book. I mean, the single greatest thread of this autobiography is music. And the audiobook plays clips from the songs or performances as she's talking about them. And it is so freaking cool to hear her talk about and break down all these songs and moments and then actually be able to hear it. Misogyny this woman faced in her career as an extremely talented director who was never fully recognized for her talents and who faced like a barrage of media speculation and character analysis and like diva reputation that's honestly like pretty unfounded, and really was just hurtled against her because she was such a private person that didn't speak on her life. And man, everyone should read this book. Everyone should learn about the genius that is Barbara Streisand. I just loved it so much. I gave it 5 stars. It's probably one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. Ooh, next I read a book called This Is Going to Hurt, or This Is Gonna Hurt a Little, but This Is Going to Hurt. It's by a man named Adam Kay, who trained to be a doctor in Britain. So he went through the NIH, is that right? I don't know, their healthcare system. And he just documents what it was like to be a young new doctor, all the resources that he wasn't provided, all the stressful situations he was put in, all the hours he had to work overtime, all the money he wasn't making. Like, it's told in a very like doctor's journal, short story-esque patient stories kind of vibe, where it just highlights all these themes of how difficult and all-encompassing it is to be a doctor, especially in this system, NHS, National Healthcare System, I think, or something like that, through that system. And it's endlessly fascinating, so funny, so heartfelt. It'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry. It's got everything. I rated it 4 stars. It was fantastic. Then I read my first physical book I actually have to show you, Crescent City 3, House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas, the 3rd book in the Crescent City series. I did a whole video about it, so go watch that, okay, if you're a fan, because I had so many thoughts about this book and they're all in that video. Then I read such a good book, The Frozen Lake. LOL, I mean the Frozen River, which is by Ariel Lawhon, no idea how to say that. I don't know. She's an incredible writer. Oh my gosh. This was about a midwife, and it actually is based on the diaries of a real life midwife. This author took those journals and made a whole book and a narrative kind of inspired. It's not necessarily based on this woman's life, but very much inspired by her life. It's an endlessly fascinating account of a female doctor, midwife in that time, dealing with patients and taking care of her community, bringing babies into the world. And it's threaded through the narrative of a murder in her town that she's kind of caught up in and has to help solve. And I could not recommend this book more. I think it is so freaking good. It's one of the best fiction books I've ever read. I give it an easy 5 stars. I want to read more by this author. She apparently does like other historical fiction type books. I think there's one about Anastasia. So I'm going to be diving into her more this year, I really think. But I loved this book. It was a recommendation from my Aunt Nikki, actually. And it was so good. We both loved it. And I read Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, which is a young adult fantasy series about a girl who grows up really poor and has a pretty heartbreaking family life, and a boy who is brought up in privilege, and they both want to be columnists for the most amazing paper in the town, and they are fighting for the same job. One of them leaves. There's a war between 2 gods happening, and the main character in this, she goes to be a war correspondent, and he follows her, and it's their love story, but also a very fascinating story about war, and all told within a very like fantasy-esque realm. But it's a pretty like sweet, simple read as well. Nothing's too complicated about it. It feels very young adult, but not young adult in the way that I don't like. It's funny, for not really liking young adult, I've read a lot of young adult books at the beginning of this year. That's kind of crazy. So I really recommend it. I'm excited to read the 2nd book. I think it is a slow start, but it grows on you as you read, and by the end, it really sucks you in. So if you like fantasy, young adult, romance, you will definitely like this. Pick it up. It's a short, easy, just fun, kind of lighthearted, interesting read. Okay, then I read All This Twisted Glory by Tara Maffei. I don't know if that's how you say her name. I'm sure I just butchered it. She wrote the Shatter Me series, which is an extremely popular like dystopian young adult series. This is number 3 that just came out in her fantasy series, This Woven Kingdom, which I read the first one. I really liked it. It was a bit slow, didn't suck me in as much as I wanted it to, but I was certainly interested enough to continue. I gave the first book 3 stars. Then the second book I adored. I loved the second book. I gave it 5 stars, which made me super freaking pumped to read this. And I have to say, I was incredibly disappointed. Nothing happens in this book. Literally nothing happens. Nothing. No characters change, no plot moves forward, no relationships grow, nothing. Literally nothing happens. We're just sitting around in the characters' heads, learning about why they're worried about crap. It is so annoying. It is so annoying. I gave it 2 stars. I barely finished it. Not worth my time. Clearly the series is not wrapped up with this one. I'm sure she's writing many more. I won't be reading them. I hated it. Okay, and then lastly, I just finished Ali Hazelwood's new book, Bride, which I loved, okay? You know Ali Hazelwood is my favorite romance author. I love her feminist novels. I give every one of her books 5 stars because they're just that good. I love them so much. I just must be her perfect audience because anything this woman writes, I adore. So when she said she was writing a paranormal romance, I was like, what the frick are you talking about, lady? This could not be further from her content that's normal. And I was so intrigued. I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck is this gonna be like? And I will say, reading it at the beginning, it's about a vampire who is from a prestigious vampire family, has to grow up in the human world as collateral to maintain the peace between the werewolves and the humans and the vampires. And she has to come home as an adult and marry a werewolf who they're like sworn enemies, to maintain peace and not create war between the 3 species, okay? She marries the alpha of the werewolf pack. He seems to hate her and not want anything to do with her. She doesn't want anything to do with them either. Stuck in this world she doesn't want to be in, trying to figure it out. She's also trying to find her best friend who's been missing for 3 months, and she slowly grows to kind of appreciate her surroundings, gets to know the werewolves, finds out she likes them, they may not be as bad as she thought, and she develops an amazing relationship with her husband, and it turns into a real romance. They actually, well, I won't spoil it, but it's very, very good. I will say it was a bit jarring because it's very different from her normal vibe, but I really loved it. I loved her world building. I loved how creative she was. There was one thing that was a pretty prominent feature that led me to not give it 5 stars. I'm not gonna explain it, but if you've read it, it's the whole knot business. I did not like that. It was too much for me, okay? It was just too much. I don't read books for the smut, and it was just too much smut for me and too much weird specific smut. So if that's your thing, go for it. Amazing, wonderful. I don't discredit the book and say it's bad because of that. It's just not my cup of tea. It's not what I would prefer. And so I gave it 4 stars because of that. But this book is incredible. Like, you should read it. It's so fun. It's so Allie Hazelwood. And I loved that she branched out and did something fun and different and new. So that is it. Those are all the books I read so far this year. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you've read down below if you've got any recommendations for me based on what clearly I like to read from this video. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!